of Wheatland Fire. I've been a member here for 35 years. I'll introduce the other members in the room as well. We have Jeff Kanan sitting there, who was on the building committee and part of the whole design process. Jerry Ryle, who is one of our semi-retired members in back, that's been a member for over 40 years. Aaron Richter, firefighter. John Winter, who is also a firefighter and was on the building committee and was part of the design process. Ed Appleby and Heather Appleby, both firefighters. Tracy Denkel, an EMT, and Ryan Serini, a firefighter on the department. We're glad that you took the time to come up here and try to get some of the facts straight. There's been a lot of misinformation going around, and it's very informal. I'm going to start with the history of the building and how we got to where we're at, and then I'll explain all the components of the new building. Please feel free to stop me at any point and ask a question, and we can discuss it. And then at the end, we'll have time to even answer some more questions. The current building that we're in was built in 1977 for a price of about $42,000. It served the town well over the years. It's still structurally sound when you look at it, but it is not big enough in height or width, and it has a few issues with it, but it's just obsolete for our needs. So we came to the point that we don't have enough storage, we don't have the height in it. We've got 11-foot 6 trucks parked in a building that has 12-foot doors on it, so it's pretty tight, and actually only 2 of the stalls hold an 11-foot 6 truck. The stalls on the outsides don't even have that much head clearance on them. So we're kind of cramped in here. We don't have a room for an overhead exhaust system, and we said remodeling this building because of the overall size constraints really isn't a practical solution. It would make more sense to build a different building and keep this building as some sort of a town garage. We don't have enough storage space. We only have this small brown building up there where the lawnmowers and things are parked. And we took down a shed a few years ago that the town had things stored in for the Parks Department. So we kind of felt, yeah, leave this here. We'll use it for some other purpose. But 2 years ago, actually it's about 3 years ago, we started talking about this. We were approached by a couple of different design firms that came in, and one of them said, we'll do a needs survey. So that was Keller out of Kaukauna, and they did a needs survey for us, and they interviewed the fire department, they interviewed the constable, they interviewed the people in the office, the building inspector, the judge, and they said, based on our needs and the projected growth of the town and what we see, they proposed building a 24,000 approximately square foot building, which would be a 2-phase process. The initial phase was to build the fire station where the volleyball courts are here in the back, and once that was complete, then demolish this building and replace this with the town hall. Now that study was done before any of the work was started on the town hall. So a question just popped up this week: why did we spend all the money on the town hall if we're going to tear it down and build a new one when we build the fire station? So I will answer that question shortly. So Keller came back and they proposed this 24,000 square foot building at a cost of $5.4 million. Now that $5.4 million initially included removing or demolishing this building, and then the town said, oh no, we're not going to do that, we just painted it, let's move it. So they said, all right, we'll move it up to where the brown building is and replace that old brown building up there. Then it was to demolish the old town hall and then basically create an entrance, and this would be the main complex. The town board shot that down right from the start. They said, we're not spending that kind of money, we're not doing it. Okay, fine. At that point, they had already initiated tearing the siding off the town hall and planning on putting the new siding on, and the town hall has been remodeled to that point. So Keller was kind of pushed out by the board, and the board signed an agreement with Scherer Construction to be the construction manager for the project. And we were told to form a committee, which we did, which included myself, Jeff Kanan, John Winter, Tracy as the secretary, Brian Kirkman, and we formed a committee to design a fire station that would last the town for 50 years into the future to meet its needs.
we also had an individual from the Parks Board and also Kelly Wilson from the town board. We're part of that committee.
So we looked at what does the town need, what do we need as a fire department, how do we stay in compliance with all the upcoming things that we have. SPS 330, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which are the state regulations now for fire department operation. Although they're only 8 pages, they refer to NFPA regulations as being the go-to document, which is thousands and thousands of pages of regulations that we have to comply with. So we said, we'll design a building that if we can't do this for the first 20 years of the building's life, that it needs no additional renovations, remodelings, or additions, we didn't do a very good job. Because if we have to put anything onto this building, add onto it before it's even paid for, the community is going to come back and say you didn't plan this out very well. So we added some extra size to it. We added all the components that we felt were necessary. Plus, there's a need at some point in the near future for some level of staffing. We are an entirely all-volunteer department at this point. We have about 32 active members. But like any small town in the area, and about 70% of all your firefighters in the country are volunteer. Randall and Wheatland are the last 2 completely all-volunteer departments in Kenosha County. Every other department has some level of either paid on-call or in-house or on-premises staffing. And we would like to stay volunteer as long as we can. But like any other small department, we know that during the day, a lot of our members work outside the community and are physically just simply not here, and it leaves us very short-handed in the day. So we might have to look at some staffing in the near future. So we did include some provisions for that in the plans. So I'm just going to start and talk about the footprint. We have an existing 25,000 gallon cistern, which is right outside the back wall of this building. As many of you know, we have no fire hydrants in our town. We rely on 3 25,000 gallon cisterns in the ground, one here, one at St. Alphonsus Church, and one at St. John's Church for our initial water supply. Then we start either going to outside sources like City of Burlington or a river or a stream or some other community to truck water into our fire scenes. So we said there's nothing wrong with the existing cistern, which is located right here, so we're going to leave that in place. The new building is also going to be required to have fire suppression in it. We currently do not have fire suppression in this building. You have $2.5 million worth of fire trucks parked in here that have no sprinkler system over the top of them. And surprisingly, fire stations do have a problem with fires. We keep these trucks for a lifespan of 30 plus years. They are, I like to say, living, breathing organisms. As you came in, you heard about unplugging the truck. They are plugged into electricity 24/7 and air 24/7. In the life of their trucks, it's undoubtedly possible that some of these trucks may have some sort of an electrical malfunction, and we don't want to lose everything. As much as we maintain them, as careful as we are with everything that we do, there's always that chance. And as probably many of you remember, Silver Lake lost their fire station to a fire quite a few years ago. And it does happen. So we do have to have a fire suppression and a sprinkler system in place. So that justifies one of these 35,000 gallon in-ground tanks. And the additional 35,000 gallon in-ground tank would have had a 1,000 gallon per minute electric pump set up into it. In order to get the water out of these underground tanks, we have to take one of our fire engines and a crew and hook it up to that tank to fill the tanker, and then shuttle the tankers back and forth to the fire scene, and then have another engine at the scene, of course, to do the pumping. So it's tying up a piece of equipment every time we draw from one of these cisterns. And we said in the first 15, 20 minutes of a fire, when we're already short on manpower, it would just make a lot more sense to have an electric pump. We could flip the switch. It's a one-person operation to come back here, fill the tanker, and until we get additional mutual aid departments to come and help us, we can get that water supply initiated. And our tanker's 4,000 gallons and a 35,000, so that's 8.5 tanks of water that we'd have before we'd have to worry about going someplace else or hooking up to this one. So that was the reason for that. There were parking spaces on the back side and on this side, and a public entrance right here, and it allowed for an alleyway or a path which is on the north side of the transfer station right here. Initially, when we started talking about the building, the committee said our town constable does not have a garage to park the squad car in. So we initially put in a small garage in the corner, which was big enough not only to hold the squad car, but also big enough to hold either a small fire truck, ambulance, or some sort of a first response vehicle like that pickup if we needed to park something else in there. Okay, if our needs ever changed. So we put in one small garage up here and an office, and you'll see that it's color coded somewhat different, and that is kind of the law enforcement area to give him a private entrance. We also wanted a law enforcement component to be able to access the building. Right now the Sheriff's Department does use this building. They have access to it, and they'll come in here in the middle of the night if they need washrooms or other facilities, instead of running all the way back to Paddock Lake, since there's not much else on the west end after hours. We also like the idea that law enforcement comes into our building 24/7 and uses it because it's security for us as well, and a way to get to know all the different deputies that are working in the area. If you look at the white area here where you come in, you'll see that this is a public corridor that reaches out to the offices with 2 public washrooms and has access to a training room which holds about 60 chairs. Training is very important. Currently, Gateway Technical College, which does all the training for the fire departments and rescue squads in this area, will not hold a training in our fire station because it's not NFPA compliant. You cannot have a training or a meeting in the apparatus bay of a fire station. It has to have its own separate meeting room, which we don't have. Nor can you have a kitchen in the corner either like we have. It's just always been there. And that was there before any of those regulations ever came into place. Some people ask why is the training room big enough to hold 60 people? Because we routinely do joint trainings with our neighboring departments. Randall, Twin Lakes, who we work very closely with, come up here and spend time training with us. We go down and train with them. So having 30, 40, 50 people or more for a training is not uncommon if we do any joint meetings.
And some of the gateway classes can reach those type of
Right.
numbers as well.
So we can host those gateway classes here. County board or county fire chiefs meetings and things like that are also held and rotate around the county. Yes?
As you say, that Twin Lakes and Randall, I'm sorry, I missed the other fire department that you would work with.
Well,
the three of you. The
Okay.
three of you. Do Twin Lakes and Randall also have this size of training rooms?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. Twin Lakes is actually pretty big. I think it probably holds about 50. And Randall's, I think, holds about 35. And they wish they would have made it bigger because it's not uncommon when we have meetings and briefings, such as like for Country Thunder. We do a lot of pre-planning. When you're going to have 50,000 people in one area, every fire department around here is pre-planning and all working together if something happens. Start crowding 35, 40 people in their training room and it gets a little bit tight in there.
Gotcha.
And they wish they would have made it bigger. So the day room. Why do we need a day room? What purpose does it serve? All new fire stations have some sort of a seating area, table, chairs, located near their kitchen, and it's a place for the firefighters to gather. Now, as a volunteer department, we typically show up when there's calls, leave shortly after, and then every Monday night we either have a meeting or some sort of a training, but we're up here just about every Monday night of the month doing something. This is where we sit. We come back after a bad call, we come back in the middle of winter, after we've been out all night, we sit right here. Kind of uncomfortable, it's kind of cold in here. And traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress disorders, and stress of firefighting has become something that everybody in this industry is becoming more aware of. It's been creeping up on us and we haven't recognized it. We bring in new young members, 18, 19, 20-year-old people that are new to this. They've maybe never seen anybody die before. They've maybe never seen a dead body before. They're going to be exposed to things that they've never been exposed to before. We can't just take those people, take them on a call, subject them to that, and say go home. And they can't take that back to their families. Because if they do, and you start bringing your calls home with you, and your patients home with you, it shortens your career very quickly. and then we lose members. Every new member, we talk about the value of what are the most important assets in this building. Sure, there's $2.5 million worth of fire trucks. Every one of these members is one of the most valuable assets in this building too, and we have to take care of them. The average age of a firefighter in Wisconsin, a volunteer firefighter, is 52 years old right now. We have to bring new young people in and lower that average age. And we have to make sure that once we bring those people in and train them, we take care of them and we keep them. We can't just send them home and expect them to not have this stuff creep up on them. They were not recording, they were not recognizing suicide in firefighters and police officers unless it actually happened on the job. Now it's being recognized from this post-traumatic stress disorder and how it's catching up with people. And they're starting to realize that almost as many firefighters and police officers are dying afterwards off the job from suicide or suffering complications from it as are getting hurt on the job. So it's something that we really have to be aware of and start taking care of our members and giving them something so simple as a place where they can sit around, decompress, write the reports, take a load off their mind, and then go home when they feel good about it, and we can do a post-call review is very important. So there are 3 small bedrooms in the back. National Fire Protection Agency has a standard on what the size of a bedroom is. There has to be at least 60 square feet for a bed, and it must have a window in it that faces to the outside. So we put in 2 beds per room. They're basically 10 by 12 rooms. They're not anything big, and they're each capable of 2, so that gives us a total overnight staffing capacity of 6. Why are we building bedrooms on a building if we're an all-volunteer department and we're not having people sleep here? Well, we've had numerous times where we've had ice storms in the middle of the night, drive up here, go to a wires down call, turn around, drive home. 3-4 times a night. Our response time to get from home to here is twice as long because we're doing 20 miles an hour on the black ice to get here. And by the end of the night, people are getting real tired of just getting out of bed and coming up here and turning around and going back home. We might as well just let them sleep up here for the night. We know we got a crew here in bad weather if something happens. So that's why we put these in, and to accommodate future staffing. Also included in here, you will see that there are 3 small bathrooms. Each one of them contains a sink, a toilet, and a shower. One of the other things that is taking a toll on firefighters is cancer. That cancer is also creeping up in retirement and after their careers are over. We are continuously exposed to petrochemicals, smokes, toxins, and all kinds of things that we aren't aware of. A typical modern house built today has 4,200 pounds of petrochemicals in the construction before the carpet and furniture are put into it. What do we mean by that? Polyurethanes, plastics, glues, adhesives, and all kinds of things that are in modern building materials that weren't in those homes 100 years ago. The particle board, that's all held together by polyurethane glue. When that burns, it emits extremely toxic smoke, a lot of it containing cyanide and other things. So the new rule of thumb basically is shower within the hour. Get those toxins off of your body, get those toxins off of your skin as soon as possible before it gets absorbed into you any deeper. And also, don't take the stuff home to your family. Don't take it back to your washer at home. Don't take those dirty clothes back there and contaminate any farther. Sometimes we aren't always aware of the contaminations that we're exposed to. When I became a firefighter, there was not a term called CBRN. That came in about 20 years ago, called chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Things that we now are trained for as firefighters that we were not trained for then. The exposures that we could be seeing out there, and diseases that we may not be aware of. Everybody hears about coronavirus. Well, there's been several of these viruses over the years, and the incubation period is 14 days. If we get to a house where we know that somebody is sick and they're exhibiting symptoms, but we don't know what they have, it allows us to come back here and decontaminate our bodies before we go back to our families and spread that any further. So that's why we put in separate washrooms in the back with showers. We did that because when this fire station was built in 1977, firefighting was a male-dominant profession. There were few, if any, women that were involved in firefighting. Now, it's become a fairly large percent of females that are firefighters and paramedics, EMTs, in this workforce. And that percentage varies continuously. There's a fire station not too far from here that was built 15 years ago. They put showers only in the men's room. So now, as they have more and more women, they have to remodel their fire station and make accommodations for the females as well. So in one of the seminars that I went to along with Jeff, we went down to North Carolina for a 3-day building conference on specifically building fire stations. They said build separate individual washrooms, and depending on, it makes no difference what the census of your crew is, male, female, half and half. There's accommodations for everybody, and it's fair, and it will keep your town out of a lot of legal trouble in the future. So that kind of explains the corner of this building. And then there's also one additional washroom here, which is a requirement that has to be outside the green area, and that is for gross contamination. What do I mean by that? Somebody goes on a call and they are completely covered with blood. They're completely covered with some sort of a chemical. We don't want to track that into the rest of the station. We want that person to get off the truck, go straight in there, disrobe, and start washing, and keep all that contamination cornered out of the living quarters area. We don't often know what we get exposed to. We have gone to calls in our home and homes in our town that are infested, often not clean, and we don't want to bring that back and spread that any further than we have to. So it's very important to have this additional bathroom, washroom here with an additional shower so that we can stop that. You'll see a locker room here. It's called the turnout gear locker room. See these red and black lockers here? We've got 24 of them right now. They were purchased by the firefighters. And we bought those because years ago the standard was to have lockers running down the side walls of the fire station. And as the truck started up and the exhaust started spewing out the side, it basted all the turnout gear that the firefighters that weren't there, all that extra turnout gear that's sitting in those lockers, got basted with exhaust. All that contamination was sitting in the tops of those pants, in the boots. When they started recognizing that there's a high incidence of cancer in firefighters, one of the first things they started recognizing was prostate and testicular cancer. Why? Because all that contamination is sitting inside those pants. Now the guys come in, put their pants on, wear that, their pores open up, and they start absorbing all of that into their bodies. So for two reasons, we said we don't have a lot of room, but we'll move these lockers off the sides of the trucks and also behind them. Because the trucks sit so close together, we don't want somebody getting snagged on the side of a piece of apparatus as it's pulling out, and then they get caught and rolled between the door and the side of the truck. That has happened, not here, thank God, but that type of incident has happened, and that's something we wanted to prevent. So this is a typical way that you'll see the gear sitting in the lockers, and as the trucks would start and drive out, all that soot and everything would just land right on those pants. So we changed that, and we wanted to make that safer. So we're going to take these same lockers and be able to put them into this locker room, which has an entrance. So as the firefighters respond to the call, they drive around, park back here, come in this door, put their gear on, and they approach all the trucks from behind and walk up alongside from behind, and then they're not in between them while they're getting dressed so they don't potentially get snagged. So then I'll continue to go around this part. Yes?
Excuse me, I sneezed.
So we'll go around, and then here, this is the pump room for the sprinkler system. We have a mud room which has some deep sinks and basically a place to decontaminate hose or gear or things like that. And then the gear laundry. Also now is to wash all of this equipment after we're exposed to smoke, take it apart, wash it, and dry it. And not in the dryer, it has to be basically hung dried or low temperature dried, then reassemble it before the next call. Now on a lot of new fire trucks, they're doing what's called clean cab technology, where the dirty gear is no longer allowed back into the cab of the truck. Either they send out a van or a pickup truck to pick up all that contaminated gear, or they bring huge bags out, they put it in, seal it up, and then they can haul it back so that it's clean. But they don't want people sitting with that dirty clothing on top of the seats and contaminating the seats for the next call. They've even come out with disposable seat covers, and in Europe, and sometimes Europe does things before we do, every fire truck now is built with an empty cabinet on the side to put all that gear in to haul it back to the fire station so that they don't contaminate their cabs. So we may see that someday. But we want to make sure that before we put that stuff back into the cabs, it's clean, as well as the air packs. We have 14 air packs. Now, as we talk about all this cancer, the one thing that we've actually seen go down is respiratory problems and lung cancer, because the firefighters are very diligent about wearing their air packs, and that's protecting their lungs, but it's the skin and everything else that's getting exposed. So as we come back, we also have to take those air packs and gross decontaminate them here, and then they'll come over to another room where they're prepped, and we put fresh tanks on them before we put them back onto the trucks. So that's why you'll see this SCBA storage. And then going across this way, this is a hose and equipment storage area. Profile of the building. Why is the ceiling height so important? We take an 11-foot truck and we put a 6-foot person on top of it to pack the hose back in. On some of these bigger trucks, we can't do it in here. So in the wintertime, we're doing it outside in the middle of the night. When we come back from a call, we have to put fresh hose on and prep the truck for the next call, and we're doing it outside in the middle of the night because there isn't a place in here that we can always prep and pack the hose back on the trucks. So I'll discuss that a little bit more in the size and the length of the bays and the way they are designed the way they are, but we have a place for fresh, dry hose to be stored after it's cleaned over here. Then we come across here, there's a computer storage room, clean room basically, IT room, an EMS storage room, which is strictly for our medical supplies, a locked storage, and then there's a shared office for the chief and the assistant chief, and then a combined office for fire inspectors, and also basically record keeping. We don't have enough space here. Right now our whole office space is 2 washrooms and 2 small offices, and it's pretty crowded. So we would have a lot more office space, and then a radio dispatch room. Now, all of our dispatching is done by Kenosha County from the 911 center. So we get the calls, we don't have anybody here answering calls or anything like that, but a lot of times when we do have a major incident, large fire, whatever the case may be, we have additional departments that come here to back us up once we're out. And I can explain that in a little bit, but it's a nice place to have an office where somebody can come up here, stand by in that office. When we had the tornado, we had people showing up here, how can I help, what can I do? And we didn't really have a place to receive those people, let them check in and know that they're here or what they can offer us. So having some sort of a radio dispatch room would be helpful. There's always the chance too that we need a backup dispatch center in case anything happens with our connection with county dispatch, which can. So I'll cover now the bays and what the purpose is of each of the bays and why they're built the way that they are. As we talked about the decontamination, one of the things with our current fire station, the way everything is jammed in here, if we want to wash one truck, we wash one and we dry down 2. The truck that we washed, the left side of the other one, and the right side of the other one next to it. So we're constantly getting that water and splashing all over. Every time we wash the truck, all that contamination, whatever might be on that truck, the smoke, the soot, anything that that truck was exposed to at the fire now ends up on the concrete. We end up walking through it and tracking it all over the station. So we said we're going to put a separate bay over here, which can always be used as a storage bay at some point, with a little more aggressive pitching in the floor and a splash wall. And it's going to have all the hoses down each side, the wash buckets, everything all contained there. Back the truck in, wash it down, take off all the dirty hose, completely clean it, decontaminate it, then move that truck over to its respective bay so it can be restocked, set up, and ready for the next call, and then somebody else can wash their truck coming in right after it. That also allows, with those washrooms in the back, that if there is a crew that's grossly contaminated, they can come back and shower while somebody else is washing the truck, and we can get everybody cleaned up, get the trucks restocked, and get the crews back in service faster. Keep in mind that everybody here is a volunteer. They take time off of their jobs sometimes to go on calls. They take time out from from their families and everything else. We want to get these trucks back in service, and we want to get our members back in service as quickly as possible. Otherwise, that 1 or 2 hour fire call that we go on in the middle of the night now turns into a 5 or 6 hour event before these people can get back home and get back to their life and still go back to work the next day. So anything we can do to make this more efficient is helpful, yes.
How many calls do you go out on a week or a month?
Okay, good question. Last year we had a total of 250 calls. The year before was 270 calls. And we're actually down a little bit in calls because we've had this 3-year monsoon season, so we've had virtually no grass fires, which is probably 20, 30 calls a year. So you can add that on to it. Now those are a mixture of fire and emergency medical services, of which about 100 and some of those are fire. There's some combined that are fire and EMS, like car accidents, and then there's a lot of them that are just EMS that we go on. But we've seen a steady volume increase, and I think about 8 years ago we looked back and we were somewhere around 180 calls. So the volume is increasing primarily in the EMS, but also in fire. So the good part is we have less fires than we used to years ago. We have worked hard in prevention. We have good building inspection codes, things like that. It lessens the overall incident of fires, but the fires that we have now are becoming more complicated and more difficult to fight than they were years ago as well. The length of the bays and what was intended. 14 by 14 doors. Most of the larger trucks are actually over width than standard, and they're all just shy of 12 feet. I don't think we'll ever see them get much taller than 12, but we went with 14-foot doors to leave plenty of room to back them in and out, and plenty of headroom over the top of them as well. We went with a 60-foot, it's actually 59 feet from the front to the back wall. That allows us to either put one large apparatus in there, 2 small things like 2 small pickup trucks, 2 ambulances, or in the case you see here, a small apparatus with a trailer behind it. Trailers are very practical because we can fill a lot of different needs and uses with an inexpensive way to get those apparatus to the scene, such as this off-road ATV here, which is set up for fighting grass fires. Can also do medical evacuation out of the hunting grounds, things like that. But it's just a practical way to put that on a trailer to haul it around. We also don't have, and would like to at some point, a small boat. Not anything fancy, very lightweight, something 4 people can pick up, carry it through the neighborhood, into the flood zones and things like that, and deploy it easily. We share a lot of resources with our neighboring departments, but when we had the floods 3 years ago, so did everybody else. And they were nice enough to work with us and bring us their boat when we had to evacuate some people from their homes. But if we would have had a rescue call or something where it would have been very time conscious, we might have had to wait a little longer for that boat than we needed to. So we all work together well, but having some sort of a small boat would be important, as well as a small trailer for transporting dirty fire hose and gear back to the fire station. When we talk about washing the hose, it would be received here and washed on the floor in here. We have a hose washer. What do we get? Well, we get a big fire. Sometimes we bring back 1,000, 2,000 feet of hose. It's frozen. It's covered with mud. It's covered with hog manure, cow manure, chicken manure, eggshells, you name it. Wherever we go, it's covered. And we have to clean it and try to get it stocked back onto the trucks. So having a place where we can lay that out, wash it down, run it through our hose washer, which we have a portable hose washer, and then get it hung up to dry, and then be able to stock fresh hose back onto the trucks is important. So behind each of the large trucks is enough room so that we can lay that hose on the floor and pack it in. You'll see this one says mechanics bay. The only difference about that is that it's a completely flat floor. We have an in-house company that comes in-house once a year and does our testing, certification, and maintenance for the trucks. And we're very fortunate. They do a very good job for us. The pumps are all UL tested, and that's part of what we need for our ISO rating in the future to help lower it. And we wanted to have a flat floor where our in-house mechanic, when he comes in to work on them, it's an outside service, but when he comes in to work in-house, we don't take the trucks out We have a flat floor where he can put the jacks on, work on it. There's no drains, there's nothing that prevents him from having easy access under the trucks. This is also a storage bay. And then this will have a large center trench drain down the middle. This one has an isolated drain with an isolated holding tank. We don't always know what we're going to be washing off these trucks. It allows that water to go in its own separate tank and be treated separately if necessary. Currently, all of our drain water from inside the apparatus bay goes into our septic tank and then ends up in our groundwater anyway. So as many of you have heard, recently there's been some stuff on the news about PFAS, these fluorine-based firefighting foams causing cancer. It is a problem. We do use foam, but we have not used any of that, at least in the last 15 years. We've been using a biodegradable foam. So that is not a concern, at least for our department and our water supply here, but we certainly don't want to have something like that contaminating our septic system and then ending up in the groundwater. So it does have its own separate holding tank, and then this would be for washing the bay floor and if we do a quick rinse. We put in one extra bay here, and I'll explain that in a little bit. A place for the mini pumper or the crash truck, a place for the engine. Well, actually they're showing this as a ladder truck. This is the ladder truck, excuse me, this is the tanker. They can all be moved around. And then a place for an ambulance. You got it? And a place for an ambulance. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. Extra or potentially 2 extra spaces. So we looked at what does it cost to put the space on now and build it for in the future, or add the space in the future. So a bay on this station in this current configuration is about $300,000 in cost. If we add that bay on, eliminate that bay now and add that bay on in the future, it's $1 million. Why? All the equipment is here. Building this now is of course less. If we want to add an extra bay on here, we just paid for a wall that we no longer need. Now we have to pay for that wall again. We have to pay for the footings again. We have to pay to add on to all the mechanical. So we looked at what does it cost. It's about 3 times the cost to add bays at a later point. We took a tour of the city of Kenosha's new fire station, and they came up with the same numbers, 300,000 and $1 million to add a bay on at a later point. They wanted to go 6 bays on their new station. They ended up at 5. But also keep in mind, that's one of 6 fire stations in the city. This is the only one that we have in the town of Wheatland. So, county resources, shared resources. We are part of the Kenosha County Chiefs and Captains Association, which shares a lot of things that we couldn't do on our own, such as the dive team, the hazardous materials team, the high angle and trench rescue teams, what they call now the rescue task force, which is a group of people that are trained to go into active shooter situations and remove injured people out behind the police department, work along with them. So we have a lot of resources in this county organization that we're a part of, and they deploy some of these resources throughout the county. And one of the things that they said that they'd like to put out on the west end of the county would be a hazmat trailer. There's 2 of them. So we can have a hazmat trailer on each end of the county so it could be deployed to an incident quicker. If we had one out here, we'd have to wait for it to come from the other end of the county right now. So we put a little space on there so if that need ever comes up, we'd be able to do that. And also the potential of running an ambulance out of here. We were donated 2 ambulances, one to Wheatland and one to Randall when Silver Lake dissolved. Those are currently sitting and holding. As many of you know, Silver Lake Rescue went out of business a year ago, and basically all the operations of rescue have been taken over by Twin Lakes. When we initially talked to Twin Lakes, we said, you're going to need more than 2 ambulances. They said we can do it with 2. They bought a 3rd, and for the last week and a half we've been operating on 2 again because one is temporarily out of service. The idea of having reserve resources here or at Randall for major events, should anything happen, I think is in this town's best benefit in putting the space in now. If for some reason at some point anything ever changes and our emergency medical services are delivered by somebody other than Twin Lakes, we have a great working relationship with them. They are a quality professional organization. They do a good job for our town, and I hope nothing ever happens that we lose them. But we've also, in the last 2 years, seen 2 rescue squads within 10 miles of this building go out of service. So we're looking out for the future of this town should something ever happen that we have to deliver our emergency medical services some other way. And having an ambulance in here is an important part of this whole operation. We tried to take everything into account that we could with the space and the size and not get this any larger than it needed to be. We've also seen that Flight for Life is no longer operating their helicopter out of McHenry. They were operating one out of Waukesha, one out of McHenry, and one out of the Fond du Lac area. So they've switched, somebody else is operating a helicopter, but they started a service with ground ambulances, and they've put 3 ground ambulances into this area that are operated under Flight for Life. And informally, and it was very informally, I did ask them if they'd be interested in a place in parking an ambulance here, which could potentially have been that back garage as well. And they said they would be interested in that, and that was an informal discussion. But that would also give us the ability to have that ambulance parked here, no cost to us, which is $400 and some thousand a year crew to staff that. They're not obligated to respond to us, but certainly they would help us if we asked for them, and they were in the area, they'd certainly respond for us. They did actually work out an agreement with Lions Fire, and they're parking their ambulance there right now. So we kind of missed.
I'm sorry, where?
Lions.
Oh, Lions, okay.
So, and they're parking that ambulance there. So it was a very informal, just conversation, and that's a dynamic operation, and that may change in the future. Yes?
Are they gonna be at Lions, like, temporarily? Are they on a contract there, like, any kind of?
Basically, it's.
Are they waiting for you to get this?
No, it's basically an agreement as they will, they're trying to feel out what their resources fit in the community, how they fit best for the community. So they're not obligated to be there. There's nothing exchanged. It's simply just a convenience for both.
Where's the nearest helicopter then? Waukesha?
Yeah.
What happened in McKenna? Where's the nearest one out there?
It's still there. It's going to be operated by a different company.
Okay.
So that notice was just made. So those are all very preliminary things.
They're also paramedics,
Yeah.
so they could push drugs. Nobody around here but Salem.
Right.
Right there on
Paramedic
Centegra,
right
right, in McHenry?
Yeah.
Is that where they're landed? Right, because, I used to live in McHenry, and there's several people that actually
Yeah.
have been in that helicopter.
And we're currently working with Twin Lakes Rescue, and hopefully within this next year, we will be able to provide paramedic service in this area. So that's something that's in the works, very preliminary right now. But again, having that extra resource, something to keep in mind, our nearest hospital is Burlington. It's a smaller hospital. If we have a multi-patient incident and we start transporting numerous patients, next hospitals are Kenosha, Racine, Lakeland, McHenry. The transport times to send an ambulance to one of those hospitals and get back here is going to be an hour round trip. We're going to lose those ambulances for a long time. If you have an incident in Kenosha, they have 5-10 minute transports, they're back in the area right away. We don't have that luxury. So we need a little bit more resource and capacity out here, even though we're in a rural area. We still have mass crowd gatherings. We still have Highway 50. One bus accident, something like that happens, we could have multiple patients. And what we call a mass casualty incident could be put into place. We do have a thing called MABUS, Mutual Aid Box Alarm System. That is a pre-planned set of response cards where we have worked with all the area fire departments and rescue squads. So if we have a major incident, they will send us additional resources. Much as we're part of that to send them resources in the middle of the night, we all work together. So there is something in this area is being taxed, and their resources are getting pulled harder and harder in a lot of different directions. So we also need something a little more robust on our own that has the capacity in case all of our additional resources that are coming in are not all available through that MABUS system. We see more and more passes too that other departments are not available to help each other out. So then looking at the front of the building, one of the concerns was the overall size and the height of the building. Reasons for that: we need that room so that you can stand on top of the truck to work on it. Also, in order for these trucks to be worked on, with this cab forward design like they have, or cab over design, it also means the cab tips up so that the engine compartment can be accessed. We can't do that in this building. So when our mechanic does come in, when our mechanic does come in to work on the trucks in the building, sometimes he has to pull them outside and work out in the weather depending on whatever it's going to be for the day. Again, that would be your wash bay, and then it would go right on down. Now this could always be used as a standard storage bay at some point too. Other reason for the additional height is exhaust systems. We are required to have some sort of an exhaust system, which we do not, to take the diesel fumes out of the building. There's 3 ways of doing that. There are the yellow hoses that run on the track, which you see in a lot of fire stations, where the hose hangs down, goes onto the exhaust, and follows the truck out of the building. That works very well. We don't have the height in our ceilings to do that. Kind of impractical. There's a passive filtration system which uses HEPA filters, comes on whenever there's trucks started or the lights are turned on or the garage doors go up, and it would filter all that air in the building. And there's also a filter that goes underneath the truck and diverts the exhaust through a filter when the truck is either backing into the building or when it first starts and pulls out. Cost-wise, between those 3 systems is all very similar. It's all kind of a matter of choice of what works out best for each individual department, but we are required to have one of those 3 systems. The north end of the building, you
So
see,
what system would be proposed in this building then?
we have not set that. Because the cost is about $10,000 per stall, that cost has been included into the budget for the building. But we haven't specifically said whether we're going to go with a collection hose or a HEPA filtration system. But the cost is about the same for either one of them. There's pros and cons to both. The downside of the exhaust hose is, as the truck is backed up to the building and now has to stop, somebody has to get out of the truck, take that hose, walk it over, put it onto the exhaust, and either clamps onto the exhaust magnetically or pneumatically, and then the truck is backed into the building. I see a lot of fire stations where they have the yellow hoses and they're just hanging there and they never get used because people don't put them on. It's a matter of self-disciplining all the firefighters to put those hoses on. Where the passive filtration system that draws all the air into the building, filters it, puts it back into the building again, has its benefits in that it's more user-friendly. It does allow some of the exhaust to get in the building before it captures it, but it does work just as well, and it is NFPA approved. The filters that go under the trucks work very well too, but that's also a major modification in the exhaust system of each vehicle when it's purchased. To put that equipment in and then maintain it and clean those filters, they have to be taken out, cleaned, and then put back in and maintained from time to time too. But that's the most user-friendly of the 3 systems. But either way, the cost is the same for them, so we've budgeted that into the building. We just haven't quite decided which way we're going on that yet. So, on that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
On the north side, or facing this way, would be an entrance into the bay, which is also a fire escape, and then the main entrance with parking along here. And then on the east side, as it faces to the hill, would be that separate law enforcement entrance and garage door into the kitchen area, and then into the sleeping quarters needs its own separate entrance. And then this would be the south side facing out towards the transfer station. So there would be 3 doors on that. This would be the entrance that the firefighters would use to access the building, most likely. There was another plan, and get into the budget here in a little bit, but there was another plan, and I can show it to you, but it's been shown on a couple of the different websites that you'll see. Basically, there was some pushback about the squad car garage. We went to a conference in Chicago. We sat down and talked to some architects that did an independent consultation on our building. Supervisor Wilson went with that. And at that point, we modified the plan. We removed this and expanded the size of the training room to a 100-person room it had no impact on the cost of the building. It was strictly more of an appeal issue and to make the building more saleable by removing the law enforcement component from the building and putting a bigger training room. In the end, it did not affect the cost on the building at all. And I can certainly show you that plan, but otherwise that is the only difference between the two plans.
One major thing that the architect at Shear that we're working with mentioned is once you get that outer footprint established, however you fit those little pieces of the puzzle inside doesn't drastically change the price at all. It's still walls and electrical and plumbing, so as long as you can establish that outer footprint, things can move around in there, and that's why when Lou said it really wasn't any difference in price by rearranging kind of that back top left corner up there, because it's just moving different walls around and things like that. So.
Another important feature of this building is we looked at construction methods. Initially, we looked at the building being a steel frame building similar to this, and Share offered the option of precast concrete walls for the apparatus bay. That option was only $113,000 to basically build concrete walls all the way around the apparatus, give it a stronger building, and also allow mechanicals to be placed on top of the building instead of around the perimeter, which meant your parking spaces could move in. It took up a smaller footprint. But most important of all is it was a far more structurally sound building by going to precast. And
If you're not familiar with precast, the new 5-star building, as you get into them, like I said, that's precast concrete. So that's all precast. The walls are built in forms, shipped there, and stood up. And
You know, the flatbeds you see that slow you down in the morning going to work, going down 50, that's all the precast walls.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So-
Can be more efficient as well.
we initially looked at making the west side, the apparatus bay, precast, figuring that most bad weather comes from the southwest, and it would be a far more storm-proof building. And then the back side of the building would have been the structural steel. That was a $113,000 option. That was included into the budget. We could go precast all the way around the building if we chose to do that. That'd be an additional $113,000, which would make the outside of the building very, very strong. So I think the next part, talk
For
about
the time being, it's cast on the front,
steel on the back.
So that's what you see in that budget. For the time being.
Tornado is the cast, precast all the way around the whole underneath.
So, some of the confusion that has evolved out of this. At one point, yes, there was a $5.4 million number thrown out. That was the initial combined facility. That is no longer even on the table. Somehow $5.8 million got out there. Somehow $6 million got out there. And now I hear $8 million. Those are all numbers that are inaccurate, and the official budget is 3.764. Estimated at 3.5% interest, depending on when we would actually move forward on this, and amortized over 20 years, would be a cost to be levied to 80 cents per thousand of assessed value on a property. $80 for each 100,000, or about $160 on a $200,000 home. You can figure out what it's going to cost you based on that.
That's depending on the interest rate though, because that can go up to 4.5.
It could. It depends on the interest rate. We could also do a little bit better if we were to secure maybe a USDA loan or something like that, or we can find something a little bit lower. But right now, that was what we used as the average interest rate when this was prepared. So it could vary. Also, is that inflation on a construction project is about 5% per year. This is in no way a pressure tactic, but each year we wait, we're either adding 5% more onto the price or figuring out where we're going to cut 5% out of the end project. But that gap is going to continue to widen as we don't move forward on this.
I
Yes,
just want to interject something here again. This whole project started, as of right now, we could have a fire station sitting right next door here, that'd be bigger than the one we're gonna be building, for 2.8 million with the other company that started out. But our town board, especially the head guy, put a stop to this whole thing. So now it's gonna be 3.8, and if we don't do it now, it's gonna be way more. And eventually it will get done, or there will be no fire station, and you're gonna have to depend on the departments from other areas.
so your inflation difference each year is somewhere around $150,000 to $170,000 that it's gonna create a gap, yes.
When did they turn down the 250?
Ask our town chair.
You can direct that question to him.
I mean, that was like recent, is all I'm asking, when,
That was
not why.
that was in 2018. So, but that gap will continue to widen just based on inflation, regardless of who does the building. But we did look at, as we studied this, we did look at a couple of other buildings, and we toured the Salem Fire Station, which is part of a big combined building for their maintenance and street department and everything. But we wanted to look at that to just see all their different components. The overall project there does not fit our needs. We looked at Pleasant Prairie, and we looked at a couple of other ones up in Door County and out in Iron Ridge. And we kind of looked at the extremes of all the different building methods as well as planning. And I think what we comfortably came out of that with is, if you cut yourself too short and don't plan on adding on to this or leave the right room for it in the future, it's going to cost a whole lot more to fix it and add on to it later than it does to do it up front. We looked at a $2.8 million building, we looked at a $1 million building. The $1 million building, although it was nice and it was well built, was nowhere near compliant with all the codes and NFPA regulations that we needed. Yes?
Is Salem up to code? Because that's where I lived
Yeah.
originally. They don't have that many bays, right? Like, how do they do that? They
Actually, I think if you combine all of Salem's fire stations together, I think they've got about 18 bays.
Because they have 2 fire stations.
Their primary fire station is in Trevor. They have another fire station in Salem, and then they're also using the old fire station in Silver Lake.
And that's why when I'm in Illinois and you see some of the smaller fire stations, it's because there's more of them.
Illinois typically uses something called fire districts. So rather than having individual departments in municipalities, they go on a countywide or a district level, and then they combine all the resources, and then they say, we'll put a small station here with 2 trucks, another one here with 2 trucks, and another one here. Antioch is part of a fire district. Antioch used to have a beautiful $1 million ladder truck. That was eliminated as being part of the fire district, and now when people in Antioch have a fire, they wait for that ladder truck to come from somewhere else. But the other thing that happens with a fire district is, where we are primarily an all-volunteer department, fire districts generally don't keep their volunteers. They become paid on call, and then they become full-time. And in my opinion, I am seeing a fire district cost a community less money than before they had their fire district.